At the door, ready to breach.
We have to move right now. Go straight to the window, do not look back. Move, move! Don't look back!
I'm right with you!
Let's go!
She's got 4 minutes to live, and she doesn't know it yet. The black SUV rides her bumper through the wet streets of Itaewon, headlights cutting through rain that hasn't stopped falling since midnight. And in the back seat, a man is bleeding through his tailored shirt and begging her not to slow down. Gift, Jackson's hands are steady on the wheel in a way that should not be possible for a woman who drives a taxi for a living. And when the first bullet shatters her back windshield, she doesn't scream. She doesn't swerve. She reaches under her seat for something no ordinary cab driver should own, and for the first time in 2 years, she lets the woman she used to be climb back into her own skin. Welcome back to Seoul and Savannah Tales. If tonight is your first time here, this is where Afro stories collide head-on with Korean power, danger, and love that shouldn't exist but does anyway. Before we go 1 second further, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what this taxi driver does in the next 90 seconds is going to make you rewind and watch it twice. And stay till the end, because the truth about who she really is will flip this entire story on its head. 3 weeks earlier, it is just another Tuesday night in Gangnam, and Gift Jackson is parked outside a nightclub with her engine idling, humming along to a playlist that reminds her of a home she hasn't seen in 3 years. She has been driving a cab in Seoul for 2 of those years, ever since she packed 1 suitcase and boarded a flight out of Atlanta with no plan beyond disappearing completely. Most nights, the job is boring in the best possible way. Pick up a drunk businessman. Drop off a couple after their first date, both of them too shy to hold hands yet. Listen to K-pop she doesn't understand a single word of and nod along like she does. Nobody in this city knows her real name. Nobody asks about the scar under her left collarbone, or why a woman with her instincts flinches at loud noises she should have no reason to flinch at. That silence is the only thing she has built for herself in 2 years, and she has guarded it like her life depends on it, because in a way, it does. She does not talk about the years before Seoul. She does not talk about the training, the deployments, the black sites she was never supposed to know the names of, or the assignment that ended with her signing paperwork that legally does not exist and walking away from a career the United States government will deny she ever had. She does not talk about the 12 months of silence afterward, the year she spent in a small apartment in Atlanta learning how to sleep without waking up swinging. She just drives. She lets Seoul swallow her whole. And for 2 years, that has been more than enough. Tonight, a man gets into the back of her cab, and every plan she has made for the rest of her quiet life falls apart in under 60 seconds. He is tall, maybe 30, dressed in a suit that costs more than the car she is driving, and the moment the door shuts behind him, she feels it. That particular electricity in the air that means something is deeply, dangerously wrong. His breathing is too controlled, too rehearsed, the breathing of a man trying to look calm while his whole body is screaming. His eyes flick to the side mirror 3 times in the first 10 seconds. He gives her an address in a voice that sounds steady on the surface and is shaking underneath it, like a man holding up a collapsing wall with his bare hands. "Drive," he says. "Please, now." She pulls into traffic without a word, watching him in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there?" He doesn't answer. His phone buzzes against his leg. He silences it without looking down. It buzzes again almost immediately, and this time he answers, speaking low and fast in Korean, words tumbling over each other in a way that even someone who didn't understand the language could hear the fear inside. Gift understands more of it than she lets on. She has spent 2 years pretending not to, and right now that pretending is the only thing keeping her calm. That's when the black SUV pulls up beside them at the red light. She clocks it before he does. Tinted windows with no visible plates. A man in the passenger seat watching her cab a beat too long, the particular stillness of someone deciding whether to make a move. Every instinct she buried 2 years ago comes roaring back to life at once, and her hands tighten on the wheel in a way that has nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with muscle memory she thought she'd never need again. "Get down," she says. "What?" I said get down, now. The light turns green. The SUV doesn't move forward. It swerves, cutting hard into her lane, and Gift does something that will replay in this man's mind for the rest of his life. She doesn't panic. She doesn't scream. She stamps the accelerator, cuts the wheel into a side street most drivers wouldn't dare take at that speed, clips a fruit stand that scatters oranges across the wet asphalt behind her, and loses the SUV somewhere in the tangle of narrow streets behind a row of shuttered shops. When she finally slows down, breathing controlled, hands loose again on the wheel, her passenger is staring at her like he's seeing a ghost climb out of a grave. "Who are you?" he asks. "Your driver," she says. "Where am I actually taking you?" His name is Jun So-hyun, though she doesn't know that yet. And he is the third son of one of the most powerful crime families in South Korea, a man who has spent his entire life being protected by other people so thoroughly that he has never once had to protect himself. Tonight, every member of his security detail is either dead or unaccounted for, ambushed 20 minutes before he flagged down her cab on a street he had no business being on alone. And the men chasing him work for the Choi organization, a rival family that has spent the better part of a decade trying to bury his father's empire. "Take me to this address," he says. "Please, I'll pay you whatever you want." "I don't want your money," Gift says. "I want to know why 3 men just tried to run my cab off the road." He is quiet for a long moment, breathing hard, one hand pressed to a wound at his side that she can smell before she can see it, copper and heat filling the small space of the car. "Because if they find me, they'll kill me," he says finally. "And now, because you're the one driving me, they might try to kill you too." If you think she's about to pull over at the nearest police station and wash her hands of him, stay with me. Because this story is about to prove you wrong in a way you did not see coming. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching this from, because what Gift decides to do in the next few minutes is the entire reason this story exists. She doesn't drop him off. She doesn't call the police. Instead, she does the one thing that terrifies him more than the men chasing him. She turns the wheel away from his family's estate and toward the industrial district on the edge of the city. And when he demands to know why, she finally tells him something true for the first time in 2 years. "Because your estate is compromised," she says. "If they knew your route well enough to hit your convoy 20 minutes from home, they know your house. We are not going there." "How would you know that?" "Because I used to do this for a living." He stares at her reflection in the rearview mirror like the words simply refuse to compute. A cab driver. A woman who has spent the last hour ferrying drunk tourists and tired businessmen across the city, casually informing him that she used to run protective details for a living, delivered in a voice as flat as if she were reading him a grocery list. "You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking?" He doesn't answer, because the truth is, she doesn't. There is something different in the set of her shoulders now, something coiled and precise that wasn't there 20 minutes ago. And for the first time since he stumbled into her back seat bleeding, Jun So-hyun feels something other than raw terror. He feels, impossibly, like maybe he isn't going to die in the back of a stranger's cab after all. She takes him to a motel on the edge of the industrial district, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions and doesn't keep good records. Parks 2 streets away and walks the rest on foot, scanning rooftops and alley mouths the way she used to, before every deployment she is not supposed to remember. He watches her do it in silence, because some part of him already understands that arguing with her right now would waste the only advantage he has left in the world. Inside the room, he finally lets himself exhale. Sitting on the edge of a stained bedspread, with his head in his hands while she checks the windows, the door, the sightlines from the parking lot below. When she is satisfied, she turns to him. "Talk," she says. "Everything. Who's after you? Why? And why your entire security team is either dead or missing tonight." He tells her his name. He tells her about his family, about the empire his father built out of shipping routes and real estate and things that never appear on paper, and about the quiet war his older brothers have been waging against the Choi family for 2 years. A war that finally boiled over tonight when someone inside his own security detail sold his route to the enemy. He tells her he doesn't know who he can trust anymore. Not his father's men, not his brothers, maybe not even his own blood. "And you," he says finally, wincing as she presses a folded towel against the wound at his side. "Who are you really?" Gift sits back on her heels, and for the first time in 2 years, she lets herself say it out loud. "I was military police. Then I was attached to a protective services unit that handled people the government didn't officially admit needed protecting. I was good at it. Then something happened on an assignment I'm not going to talk about tonight, and I left. I came to Seoul because nobody here knows my name, and I wanted to keep it that way. And now? And now I've got a bleeding crime prince in a motel room and 3 men who tried to run us off the road an hour ago. So no, tonight is not the night I get to keep my head down." If this is the kind of story that makes you want to know what happens when the woman everyone underestimates turns out to be exactly what a desperate man needs, smash that like button right now, because the next 48 hours are about to test both of them in ways neither one of them sees coming. Morning comes, and with it, a decision that neither of them wants to make. June wants to call his father. Gift tells him that is the fastest way to get both of them killed, because if his own security detail was compromised from the inside, there is no telling who around his father is compromised too. Instead, she makes him do something that clearly offends every instinct he has ever been raised with. Sit still, stay quiet, and let her work. She disappears for 2 hours and comes back with a burner phone, a change of clothes, and information that turns her blood cold. She still has one contact from her old life, a woman named Priya, who owes her a favor from a decade ago and now runs logistics for an international security firm with a Seoul office. And through her, Gift learns 2 things that change the shape of everything. First, the ambush on June's convoy was executed with inside information that only a handful of people in the organization had access to. Second, one of those people is his older brother, Jun Tae-hyun, next in line to inherit everything. "That's not possible," June says when she tells him, his face going pale in the gray morning light leaking through the motel curtains. He wouldn't. "People who benefit from your death rarely announce it in advance," Gift says. "But someone with your brother's access sold your route last night. That's not a maybe. That's a fact I'm looking straight at." He doesn't argue with her for a long moment, because some small, buried part of him has clearly suspected this longer than he wants to admit out loud. What do? We stay alive long enough to prove it. Over the following 2 days, Gift becomes something Jun So-hyun has never had before in his entire privileged, guarded life. Someone who protects him not because she's paid to, not because it's her job, but because she decided, somewhere in the middle of a car chase through Gangnam traffic, that she was not going to let this particular man die on her watch. She moves him 3 more times, staying 1 step ahead of professionals who move like they were trained the exact same way she was. She teaches him things in those 2 days that no bodyguard has ever bothered to teach him: how to read a room before he walks into it, how to notice when someone's hand sits wrong in their pocket, how to trust his gut instead of his money. And somewhere in those 2 days, something else happens too. Somewhere between the safe houses and the sleepless nights, and the moments where he watches her check a perimeter, with a focus so total it makes him forget, briefly, that his entire life is collapsing around him, Jun So-hyun starts looking at Gift Jackson like she is the only steady thing left in his world. "Why are you really doing this?" he asks her on the second night, sitting across a cheap laminate table in another forgettable room. "You could have dropped me anywhere and driven away clean. Nobody would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me," she says simply. "That's not an answer." She is quiet for a long moment, turning the burner phone over in her hands like it might hand her the right words. "I left my old job because I made a call that got someone killed, someone I was supposed to protect. I've spent 2 years telling myself I don't do this anymore because I can't be trusted to get it right. Then you got into my cab, and some part of me decided I wasn't going to let that happen twice. Not on my watch. Not this time. Something shifts in his face, something that looks like understanding, maybe even recognition, because he knows exactly what it feels like to carry a weight nobody else can see. "You're not going to fail me," he says quietly. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." If a moment like that hit you square in the chest, drop a comment telling me the exact second you knew these two weren't just business anymore. Because what happens next is going to break your heart wide open before it starts putting it back together. On the third night, June's brother makes his move, and this is where everything Gift has built over the last 72 hours gets tested for real. Taehyun tracks them through a cousin June trusted completely, a young man named Minjun who has no idea he's being used as a conduit, and 6 armed men descend on the safe house just after midnight. Gift hears them before June does, the particular silence of men trying very hard not to be heard, and she has him out through the back window and moving before the first shot is even fired. What follows is chaos. Gunfire tearing through a narrow alley slick with rain. Gift putting her own body between June and 2 different lines of fire in ways that should not be physically possible for one woman, until finally she forces him into a stolen sedan and drives them both out of the kill zone with a bullet graze along her shoulder. She doesn't even acknowledge until they're a mile away, and June notices the blood soaking through her sleeve in the passing streetlights. "You're hit," he says, panic cracking his voice for the first time since she's known him. "Gift, you're hit." "I've had worse," she says, which is true, and also nowhere near the comfort he needs it to be. He makes her pull over. He strips off his own shirt with hands that are shaking despite every instinct telling him to stay calm, tears it into strips, and presses the fabric to her shoulder with a gentleness that has nothing to do with the cold, calculating world he was raised inside. "You didn't have to do that back there," he says, voice rough. "You could have let them take me and walked away untouched." "No," she says, holding his gaze even through the pain. "I really couldn't have." He looks at her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded passing over his face, and then he presses his forehead gently against hers, just for a second, breathing her in like she is the only solid thing left in a world that has spent 72 hours trying to kill him. "Whatever happens after tonight," he says quietly, "I need you to know that no one has ever fought for me the way you just did. Not my father, not my brothers, no one." "I'm not done fighting," she says. "Not even close." If you've made it this far, you already know exactly what kind of story this is turning into, so go ahead and hit subscribe right now, because the confrontation with Taehyun is coming, and it is about to turn everything you think you understand about this family completely upside down. They regroup at a location Priya arranges, a private clinic that doesn't ask questions, and while a nurse stitches her shoulder in tight, practiced pulls, June makes the hardest decision of his adult life. He calls his father directly, bypassing every layer of security that could be compromised, and tells him everything: the ambush, the evidence Gift uncovered, his brother's name sitting at the center of it, like a stone dropped into still water. His father is silent for a long time on the other end of the line. Then he says 4 words that change the entire shape of the story. "Bring her to me." The meeting happens 2 days later in a private room at the top of one of his father's hotels. A room Gift has learned to read the way she reads every space now. Exits, sight lines, the positioning of every man in a dark suit standing too still along the walls. Jun Il-woo is a man in his 60s with a face carved out of patience and old violence, and he studies Gift for a long moment before he speaks. "My son tells me you saved his life 3 times in 1 week, he says. "He tells me you found the truth about his brother when men I have paid for 20 years could not." "I got lucky," Gift says. "I do not believe in luck," Il-woo says. "I believe in skill, and I believe in loyalty, both of which are in dangerously short supply in my organization right now." He looks at his son, then back at her. "I am told you refuse payment." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" This is the moment the entire story turns, because Gift looks at this man, this old crime lord with his patient eyes and his carefully folded hands, and something in her stomach goes very still, the way it used to go, still right before an operation went wrong. She has seen this face before, not in person, in a file. A thin, classified file she was never supposed to have read, sitting in a locked drawer in an office in Virginia 3 years ago, a file with a single photograph clipped to the corner and a name she has spent 2 years trying very hard to forget. June Il-woo, the man her old unit had been quietly building a case against for 18 months before everything fell apart. The man connected, through 3 layers of shell companies she had personally traced, to the death of the one person she failed to protect. She keeps her face perfectly still. 2 years of hiding has taught her how. I want to know that the man across from me is still alive to ask me that question next year, she says. That's what I want. Il-woo studies her for a long moment, and something that might be respect crosses his weathered face. Then it is settled, he says. You will protect my son officially, with my full resources behind you, until the matter of his brother is resolved permanently. June squeezes her hand under the table, something warm and grateful in his eyes, and Gift smiles back at him, and underneath that smile, something cold and precise is already turning over in her mind. Because 2 years ago, she left her old life, not because of an assignment that went wrong. That was the lie she has told everyone, including herself, for so long she almost believed it. She left because her partner, a man named Samuel Heather, who had a wife and a 2-year-old daughter waiting for him in Maryland, was killed on an operation that traced directly back to a shipment moving through a network owned 3 layers deep by the very man currently offering her a job. She has spent 2 years telling herself she was done, that the file was closed, that some things simply cannot be fixed, and the only mercy left was to walk away and stop looking. And now she is standing in his son's protection, holding his son's hand, being offered a permanent place inside the very organization she once spent 18 months trying to bring down. If your jaw just hit the floor, good, because we are only halfway through this story, and it gets so much bigger than a car chase and a jealous brother. So drop a comment right now telling me if you think Gift is here for justice, for love, or for both, and stick around. Because what she finds out next about Samuel Heather's death is going to change absolutely everything. That night, alone in the guest wing of the hotel, Gift opens her burner phone and calls Priya with hands that are steadier than she feels. I need everything you can find on a shipment that moved through Busan in October 3 years ago, she says. Container manifest, ownership chain, everyone who touched it. Gift. What is this about? It's about the reason I left. Priya is quiet for a long moment. You know, if you go digging into this, you're not going to be able to walk away clean a second time. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I have to. 3 days pass in a strange, suspended calm. June recovers from his wound, resuming a version of his old life with new caution stitched into every movement she taught him, checking mirrors, noticing hands, trusting his gut. He asks her to stay close, not as a bodyguard now, but as something neither of them has said out loud yet. And she says yes, because she cannot bring herself to say anything else, and because staying close to this family is the only way she is ever going to get the answers she needs. Then Priya calls back, and everything Gift thought she understood collapses at once. The shipment that got Samuel killed, Priya says, voice careful. It wasn't Il-woo's operation. It moved through a port he controls. Yes, but the manifest was falsified by someone inside his organization working against him. Someone skimming shipments and letting the blame land on Il-woo's network to cover their own tracks. Gift, the man who actually ordered that shipment moved. The man responsible for Samuel's death? It's Tae-hyun, June's older brother. The same man you and June have spent the last week trying to prove is a traitor for an entirely different reason. Gift sits perfectly still in the dark of the guest room, the phone pressed to her ear, and something inside her chest that has been frozen for 2 years finally starts to move again. Say that again, she whispers. Tae-hyun. He's been running a parallel operation under his father's nose for years, using his father's shipping routes to move things his father would never approve of, weapons mostly. And when your partner's team got too close to tracing it back, Tae-hyun made sure the operation looked like it belonged to a rival family instead of his own blood. That's the ambush on June 3 weeks ago, too, Gift. It was never really about succession. Tae-hyun needed his little brother gone because June had started asking questions about a warehouse audit that would have exposed him. The room tilts sideways. Everything Gift believed about this story, the succession war, the jealous older brother, the desperate mother's grief she never even knew about, all of it reshapes itself into something far more dangerous. Because the man she has been circling for a week, the man his own father half suspects, is not just a threat to June's life. He is the reason Samuel Heather died in a shipping container 3,000 miles from his daughter's second birthday party. If you thought you had this story figured out, you did not, because Taehyun is not just fighting his brother for an empire. He has been hiding the one truth that could destroy him for years. And Gift Jackson just walks straight into the middle of it without even knowing it. Hit that subscribe button if this twist just took the wind out of you, because we are not done, not even close. She does not tell June that night. She lies beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, and she thinks about Samuel's daughter, who would be 5 years old now, who will never know that the woman who once promised to bring her father's killers to justice is currently sleeping in the arms of that killer's little brother. In the morning, she goes to Il-woo alone. "I need to show you something," she says, and she lays out everything Priya found, the falsified manifests, the parallel weapons operation, the audit trail that leads, every single time, back to his eldest son. Il-woo reads through it in absolute silence, his face betraying nothing, though his hands, folded on the table in front of him, tighten slowly until his knuckles go white. "You are certain of this." "I am." "And you are telling me this instead of my son. Why?" Gift meets his eyes without flinching, because 2 years of hiding has taught her exactly how to hold a gaze that could see straight through her. "Because I need you to understand something first. 3 years ago, a man I loved like a brother died because of a shipment that moved through your ports. For 2 years, I believed you were responsible. I came very close, more than once, to finding a way to make you pay for it." Il-woo's expression does not change, but something behind his eyes goes very still, very careful. "I know now it wasn't you," Gift continues. "It was Taehyun, running an operation under your name to cover his own. So before I help your son destroy his brother, I need to know that when this is over, I get to look Taehyun in the eye and ask him why. Because that answer belongs to me before it belongs to anyone else in this family." For a long moment, Il-woo simply looks at her, and then, for the first time since she has met him, something that resembles genuine respect settles into his weathered face. "You will have your answer, Miss Jackson," he says quietly. "I give you my word." That night, everything comes apart at once. Taehyun, sensing that the walls are closing in, makes his final move, not against June this time, but against Gift directly. Because somewhere along the way, he has learned exactly who she used to be and exactly what she has been quietly investigating for the last week. 3 men break into the hotel's private wing just after 2 in the morning, moving with a precision that tells her instantly these are not the same low-level enforcers who chased June's convoy weeks earlier. These men were trained the way she was trained. She hears them before June does, and this time there is no motel to run to, no anonymous side street to disappear into. This time, it is her against 3 professionals in a hallway with nowhere to hide, and June standing frozen in a doorway behind her with nothing to defend himself but his own 2 hands. What happens over the next 4 minutes will replay in June's mind for the rest of his life. Gift moves through those 3 men the way water moves through cracked stone, taking the first one down before he even registers. She's crossed the distance between them, disarming the second with a movement so fast, June doesn't fully understand what he's watching until it's already over. And when the 3rd man draws a weapon on June directly, Gift puts herself between them and takes a bullet meant for the only man in this family who has ever truly seen her. She goes down hard against the wall, blood blooming fast and dark across her shirt. And June is on his knees beside her before the shooter can line up a second shot, screaming for help in a voice that doesn't sound like his own anymore. If you need a second to catch your breath after that, take it, because I promise you, what happens in the next 60 seconds decides whether this love story survives at all. Comment below with a single word for how you're feeling right now, because I want to see this comment section flooded before we go any further. Il-woo's men arrive in under 90 seconds, and the shooters are neutralized before they can finish what they started. But the damage is already done. Gift is rushed into surgery in a private clinic that exists for exactly this kind of emergency, and June sits outside the operating room with her blood still drying on his hands, refusing every attempt to clean him up, refusing to move, refusing to believe that the woman who has spent 2 weeks teaching him how to survive might not survive this herself. Woo finds him there hours later, still sitting in the same chair, still staring at the same closed door. She is stable, his father tells him quietly. The surgeon says she will live. June doesn't respond. He simply nods, jaw tight, eyes wet in a way he would never allow anyone but his father to witness. There is something you should know, Il-woo says, sitting beside his son for the first time in longer than either of them can remember. About your brother, about what she found. He tells him everything. The falsified shipments, the weapons operation running under his own name without his knowledge, the audit June had innocently started asking about weeks earlier that had, without either of them realizing it, put a target on his back that had nothing to do with succession and everything to do with covering up a betrayal 3 years deep. And he tells him about Samuel Heather, about the man Gift loved like a brother, about the death that brought her circling into their lives long before Jun So-hyun ever bled into the back seat of her cab. June sits in stunned silence, processing a truth that reframes every single moment of the last 3 weeks. The woman fighting for his life this whole time was never simply protecting him. She was hunting his brother for a crime that predates their meeting by years, and somewhere in the middle of that hunt, without either of them planning it, she fell for the one person standing directly between her and the answers she came here for. Does she know I know? He asks quietly. Not yet. When Gift wakes 2 days later, groggy and aching, the first face she sees is June's, sitting exactly where he has been sitting for the better part of 48 hours, unshaven, exhausted, and unmoving. You should be resting, she rasps. I should be a lot of things, he says. My father told me about Samuel. Gift goes very still. I know why you really came looking for us, June continues, voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I know Taehyun is responsible for his death. I know that finding that out was more important to you than protecting me ever was, at least at first. June? Let me finish. He takes her hand, careful of the IV line taped to the back of it. I don't care why you started. I care that somewhere along the way, it stopped being about him and started being about me too. Tell me I'm wrong. She looks at him for a long moment, and for the first time since she buried the woman she used to be, she lets herself answer honestly, without hesitation, without hiding behind 2 years of careful silence. You're not wrong, she whispers. It stopped being about Samuel somewhere around the second night in that motel room. I just didn't know how to tell you that without telling you everything else too. He presses his forehead to the back of her hand, holding it there like a promise. Then tell me everything else. All of it. I'm not going anywhere. If that moment just wrecked you the way it wrecked me writing it, hit that like button right now, because this story still has one confrontation left, and it is going to be the most dangerous thing Gift Jackson has ever walked into. Taehyun, cornered and desperate, makes one final move before his father can act against him, attempting to flee the country with what remains of his weapons operation and enough leverage to disappear permanently. But Gift, still healing, still moving slower than she'd like, refuses to let him vanish before she gets her answer. She finds him at a private airfield outside Incheon 2 nights later, June at her side despite every protest she makes about his safety. And when Taehyun sees her standing on the tarmac, very much alive, something in his composed, calculating face finally cracks. You should be dead, he says. I should be a lot of things too, Gift says, echoing his brother's words without realizing it. Tell me why. Samuel Heather, a man with a wife and a daughter who will be 5 years old next month. Why him? Taehyun's jaw tightens. He got too close. It was never personal. It was personal to me. What happens next on that tarmac is not the clean, cinematic justice either of them expected. It is messy and painful, and it ends not with a bullet, but with Ilwoo's own men taking his eldest son into custody, stripped of everything he built in the shadows, facing consequences inside an organization that does not forgive betrayal easily. Gift does not get the vengeance she spent 2 years imagining. She gets something quieter instead, the truth, finally spoken out loud, and the knowledge that Samuel's daughter will grow up knowing her father died a hero instead of a footnote. It should feel like enough. Standing on that tarmac with June's hand in hers, watching Taehyun disappear into a car that will take him somewhere she will never have to think about again, it should feel like closure. Instead, as the car pulls away, Gift catches a final look on Taehyun's face through the tinted window. Not fear, not defeat, but something colder. Something that looks almost like satisfaction. Like a man who lost this battle, but is already 3 moves ahead in a war nobody else knows is still being fought. She doesn't mention it to June. Not yet. But that night, lying awake long after he has finally fallen asleep beside her, Gift Jackson finds herself doing something she hasn't done in 2 years, reaching for her old contacts, her old instincts, the woman she buried the day she boarded a flight out of Atlanta, with 1 suitcase and no plan. Because some part of her, the part that used to read rooms and file classified reports, and never once believed a case was truly closed until she checked it herself twice, knows that Taehyun's smile was not the look of a man who had lost. It was the look of a man who still had 1 card left to play. And somewhere in the shadows of an empire that thinks the danger has finally passed, that card is already moving into position. And neither Gift nor the family she has chosen to protect has any idea what is coming for them next. If this story took you somewhere you did not expect, that is exactly what we do here. So hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me what you think Taehyun's next move is going to be, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that the people who look the most harmless are usually hiding the most dangerous truths. This is only the beginning of Gift and June's story, and what comes next is going to be bigger than anything you've seen so far. See you in the next one.